Call. Two men. One named Rich. That's me.
This is Jermaine. Just got off the toilet.
He's a foul man. This is the X's and O's of life.
Huh?
Yep. That's what you got yourself into there, sir.
That's okay. I can handle it.
Okay, fantastic. So, welcome back, everybody. Another little interview situation I got. I have a bigger dick than me. See what I did there? Yeah, you do.
I did.
Yep.
I did. You know,
I'm a child. No, so this is another fella I found on that on the PodMatch site, and so I like I do with everybody, I skim it, and if it strikes me, I'm like, ooh, come here and talk to me and tell me more interesting things than I have to offer you. So we did that. He humbly agreed. As you can see, his name there is Richard. I don't like the name Richard. I don't like it. It's weird. It feels very formal.
I know it is. It is. But when I was a kid, I just couldn't allow anybody to call me Dick.
Yeah. Well, fair enough. It's interesting though. So your formal name is Richard D. Bailey, correct?
Correct.
What's interesting is my initials are RD. So I just think it's kind of funny because I keep looking at him like, did I mess with my? Oh no, that's not me. Okay, never mind. So, like with all of these situations, I throw you the ball and you tell your story, and I will interject with questions and comments and all that fun stuff. But you got an interesting situation going on here, so I'm pretty excited to kind of hear what happened, what you dealt with. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yep.
I've had a pretty checkered background. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to business school or anything like that. Matter of fact, I got a master's degree in communications, which was absolutely worthless. I did nothing with.
Nice.
Yeah. And about 1987, it was the middle of the LBO boom. And a friend of mine who actually had worked for my father at the investment house, Smith Barney, said, he offered me a job, for the ripe old sum, the huge sum of $45,000 a year. I'll never forget. It was $865.38 a week, which was way more than I was making at the time.
Yep.
And basically, I jumped into, the corporate finance world, and not knowing anything. Never took an accounting course, nothing, but I enjoyed it. And this guy, basically was stealing money from the company hand over fist. But he owned it, so he figured it was his, so he could take it. Doesn't matter what the bank says and things like that. So, you wind up, I wound up being what's called a workout and turnaround guy. Nobody grows up to want to be a workout and turnaround guy. You just happen to find yourself in one and understand the rules and things like that. And that's what happened. I mean, that place turned into, I always say they bought it at the tail end of the LBO craze in 1988, and it was worth $6 million. They paid $8 million. They borrowed $10 million, and in 1991 it was in bankruptcy. So but bankruptcy was kind of fun. I realized that the whole purpose of the courtroom is to ratify the deals the creditors and everybody made in the hallway, outside the courtroom. So, I wound up being fairly good at the whole, workout and turnaround thing. Did a bunch more after that. Got hired by a private equity firm. Went to a big bank, and 2000, I decided I'm going to start it on my own. Start a fund on my own. So I raised some money. I, did this actually I think was fairly creative, because we set precedent at the SEC by going public on an obscure corner of the SEC rules, which the SEC really did not like. They never intended that to be used for that purpose. So that turned out to be my great disaster, that company that I started. So I was sitting here. I live just south of Massachusetts, just south of Boston in Massachusetts. I was sitting here, hadn't worked for I was just cleaning up the mess of my company. and I hadn't really worked or gotten paid in about a year. And I was, pretty angry with myself and, the rest of the world, and really the only person I needed to be angry with was myself. And I get a call one day from this guy, a friend of mine, who had just started at a private equity firm in New York City called Southport Lane. And, never heard of him. I've been around private equity world as a private equity consultant and things like that for a long time. Look the guy up, and it's run by this 26-year-old whiz kid named Alex Burns. Now, how this 26-year-old whiz kid got his hands on 4 insurance companies and $1 billion to invest, which is what I was told, is kind of, that's going to stoke your curiosity just a little bit.
Right.
So I go there. They hire me for a week to go and look at, some company. It's kind of my audition more than anything else. And I came back and I'm sitting in their conference room, big, huge, on 45th and Madison in Midtown Manhattan, overlooking Grand Central and the Yale Club, just a gorgeous place. And he walks in and he goes, "Should I buy, this pharmaceutical company?" I said, "No." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because you're going to lose all your money. It's a family-owned business. Every time, every wedding, every holiday, every celebration of any sort, there's going to have a board meeting and you're not going to be there, so, you're just setting yourself up to lose money." And he liked the fact that I said, "No, it's not a good deal," because only people were constantly bringing him deals because they wanted him to fund them.
Right.
So, they pay me. It was $5,000 for a week, so I was like, okay, that's better than sitting home. And so I'd sit there and he calls me into his office afterwards and he goes, "Do you like wine?" And, I'm like, "Yeah, sure." I've drank my fair share. I've been to 8 million Wall Street, in private equity dinners where you eat steaks the size of chihuahuas and drink like 4 gallons of red wine, So, so I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, okay. We'll get in touch with you." I leave there. No idea. And I found out later that they had purchased a winery out on Long Island called Lieb Cellars and Premium Wine Group. So I get a call saying, "You want to take over as CEO of this wine company?" And I'm sitting there going, now, first of all, you have to understand, there's a house in the middle of a vineyard right, a quarter mile from Long Island Sound and the ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. It's just gorgeous real estate, type A properties. It's not the Hamptons. It's the more funky bohemian North Fork, which is, pretty agricultural based. And I'm like, okay, I'll go check it out. And they send me the acquisition documents, which were just atrocious. I bought a lot of companies. I've worked with attorneys for almost all of my 30 and, doing deals and things like that, almost all of my 35 years in the business. And I'm like, who did this? This is terrible. And
why was it so bad?
Well, first of all, I reached into the envelope to pick out the acquisition agreement. And, usually they're like, this thick, and they've got like, 30 pages of definitions on the front. This was about 12 pages. It looked like a high school term paper, and on this, they spent $12.75 million in cash. There's no debt or anything like that. Total cash buy. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the financial statement. I'm like, I can't get this place past $5.5 million, in value. What do they see what am I missing? What do they see that I didn't see? And that was kind of issue number one. Why sit there and basically piss away $7 million?
Right.
So you could own a vineyard and a winery, and by the way, a vineyard and winery that lost a shitload of money. Okay. I mean, for every dollar they made, every dollar of wine they sold, they lost, 80 cents. I mean, it was just, it was financially, it was pretty tragic. So that's just, I didn't ask the question quite so, but I'm like, kept on saying, why did you guys? And I said to this kid, Alex Burns, I said, why did you buy this at this price? And he sits there and goes, I know how to do deals, Richard. And I go to learn that, it's completely, he had no he had no clue. Well, I guess I could say it. This seems like
That's what I was going to say. Like, that was literally my thought. I'm like, this guy's a fucking idiot.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that was my clue as well. And yet he's constantly telling people he's the smartest man in the room. He constantly holding himself up as a financial prodigy and things like that. So, the pieces just aren't fitting together for me. And so they hire me. I go out there. I start to run the thing, and I start noticing, huge cash transfers going through the accounts. I'm like, what is this? $250,000 came in this way, quarter went out the next day, and then all of a sudden I asked for the bank. There's things being paid out of a bank account I didn't know anything about, So I'm sitting there going, well, I finally tracked down the bank account, and I said, "Can you send me the bank?" I said to one of the lawyers. They had in-house lawyers too, which is even more shocking. And I said, "Can you send me the bank statements for that account?" And 18 million on October 1st, 2012, $18.1 million came in. The next day, $3 million went out to something called Southport Specialty Finance. And, so I'm just like, money's going all out of the place. And I'm like going, what is going on here? And, so at this point now I'm like, okay, something's definitely wrong. Something's hugely wrong. But, the pay was really good. So I kind of like, tamped everything down and said, okay, I was just going to move forward. And about 4 months later, I'm sitting in the conference room with Burns, and I'm, sitting there saying, listen, I'm going to need like $250,000 just to get through the winter, because the wine business out there is very seasonal. And he's not paying one whit of attention to me, like everybody under the age of, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not 35. Under the age of 30 nowadays, they never take their face out of the phone. Right. And he sits there, and all of a sudden he goes, oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. He turns around, gets up, and walks out. Nobody ever saw him again. All right, so something's definitely wrong. So I've got bank statements. I start looking around, and I kind of figure out that there's at least a $25 or $30 million fraud here. I have no idea what the actual size of it was at that point. So, over the course of the next, I'll speed it up a little bit so you guys can, ask any questions.
Take your time, man.
So, I sit there, and all of a sudden I try to figure out, and before that, before Burns, took a powder on everybody, we're sitting there, and I have this really, really insanely smart friend named Brad, who, is a true private equity guy. He was like number one at his MBA program at Northwestern. And, he's just a really, really smart guy. And he had a deal to pitch to Burns, because we're sitting there going, I'm going, why not? The guy says he's got like, $1 billion to spend, and at this point, I'm working for Burns. And so we make this presentation. Burns looks around the table, looks at me, goes, what do you think? I said, I like it. I know these guys, they've got the buy side of this thing filled out. They got the sell side filled out. I said, they just need some money for some machinery and equipment, and, the magic happens. I said, we can make a lot of money doing this. And he goes, okay, Richard, you run the deal. Okay. So that right there, he committed $15 million on a maybe 15-minute conversation. That doesn't happen in the real world. So my friend Brad sits there and goes, hey, Alex, before you leave. He goes, yeah. He goes, how'd you buy all this? How'd you get control of all these insurance companies, which are, the insurance? And Burns turns around, spins on his heel, Cheshire cat grin, looks at myself, Brad, this other guy, Jeff Leach, and says, Jesus with a telescope on Mars couldn't figure out how we did this. And we're all just sitting there, like, we're all pretty seasoned guys, the three of us. So, we're all just sitting there going, what did he just say? And so we run outside. We literally pack our bags and try to get outside before we break up laughing in the middle of their office, because it was such a ridiculous thing to say. And, then, 3 months later, he just disappeared. So, here I am, CEO of a wine company for 6 months, and All I know is something very, very wrong has gone on here, and as it turned out, it was they were just stealing money from the insurance company and laundering it through various companies that they owned, including the Vineyard account. So I figured it out, and I went to the FBI. And now I went to the FBI because my neighbor down the street is an FBI agent, and I literally saw him at the town. He was working the Boston Marathon bombing case at the time. I literally saw him at the dump on a Sunday. He goes, "Hey, Rich, how you doing?" I go, "Good. How are you?" And he goes, "Yeah, what's going on?" And I just looked at him. And I just blurted it all out, like an idiot. I just sat there and I said, I think I need to talk business with you. And now Dave, who lives on the street, is a jovial Boston Irishman. He's been an FBI agent for like 25 years. He's seen it all. There's nothing. And he sits there and he looks at me and he goes, "Are you okay? Are you in trouble?" I said, "I'm not, but I think my company is." And I explained it to him. Next morning, he goes, "Go home, sit down, keep your hand in your phone, keep your phone in your hand. Somebody from the bureau is going to call you in about half an hour." Sure enough, they did. So we sat there and had breakfast the next morning with the white collar crime group, and it kind of went on from there. So it was a really bizarre ride. The strangest part about it is in June of 2015, it took me about a year to get the FBI to take it seriously, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
Why were they? What was their issue?
Funny thing in white collar crimes is they don't have to take them. They don't have to take the case. They have to sit there and say, is this worth, the time we're going to spend on it and things like that. And so the Boston FBI office said that they couldn't do it. And it wound up so I wind up calling a friend of mine who I'd known for a while. It was a fairly famous detective and actor, a guy named Bo Dietl. And I said, went into his office, explained it. So he's the one who finally got me to the right office at the FBI. And there was I'll never forget this phone call. I had hired my own criminal defense lawyer, and I didn't commit any crimes.
Right.
But I'm like, I want to make sure that I'm on the right side of all this. This is something I mean, how many people go through this, in the course of a normal life? And I'm sitting there, I'm about to get on the ferry between Long Island and New London, which I had to take every week. And phone rings, and the guy's name is Michael Weinstein, great guy, criminal attorney. And he sits there and he goes, "Oh my God, are you sitting down?" I said, "Yeah, I'm in the car, And he goes, "There's a task force run out of the Justice Department in Washington on all this." He goes, "The SEC's involved, the FBI's involved, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission's involved, and he goes, and I just spoke to the lead investigative agent, and he wants to talk to you." I said, "Yeah, okay." I kind of went looking for these guys, and this is what so here I am. And then he says the one thing which I never saw coming. He also wants to know, Richard, if you'll wear a wire.
Oh God.
And
this
I
sounds
was
like an episode of the fucking Sopranos.
Well, there's some similarities. And so I was like, I gotta go home, and now I gotta tell my wife what's going on.
Yep.
And so, because she kind of knew things were bad, and she was, wasn't quite sure what was going on, and but I was still working, I was still getting paid, so she was happy about that stuff, and I was kind of leaving it all in Long Island, and but I was in New York City a lot, and so finally I come home and I tell her. She goes, "I just have a couple questions." I said, "What?" She goes, "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" I said, "Oh yeah." I hadn't the faintest clue what was going on, so I mean, but when in doubt, project confidence.
There you
go. And she goes, "Well, I'm not going to say no because I can tell you've already made up your mind. You're going to do this." I went, "Yeah, I'm going to do it." So I wound up wearing a wire. I brought cameras into meetings, all that kind of stuff. And
Jesus.
And to run to the end of the story, we got 4 convictions. Well, 4 of them pled guilty. 3 went to prison, and the 26-year-old prodigy committed suicide.
I figured.
To avoid prison. And I found out about it when it was terrible. It was October 2022. No, 2021. And my phone rings, and it's the lead agent for the FBI. Now, there was always a protocol to contact me and for me to contact. There was a text, or basically nothing on email or anything like that. It was a text. He never just called me out of the blue. I look down, I see his name. I go, "Hey, what's going on?" He goes, "Alex Burns just committed suicide." And my first response, typically profane, was, "Holy fuck!"
Right.
And that's it. And then I go, "Yeah, he wasn't tough enough for prison, so I guess I'm not surprised." And the next day, it was in the papers, in all the papers. But it was a wild scenario. How this kid got control of this money and these insurance companies. I mean, he was sending private planes for his girlfriend's dog. The typical shit that you read about in all these things. They always wind up somehow private. Flying private all of a sudden, always winds up in these things. And he wound up, whenever all was said and done, they had taken $350 million out of these insurance companies.
Good Lord. So what was the fallout for you?
Did
you get like a pat on the head and like a good job, or like what?
Basically, the insurance companies who now realize they owned a vineyard, they didn't realize they owned a vineyard. They went and sold it. And the buyer, I bid. My bid was actually higher, but I signed a non-disclosure agreement on that. But I'll just say if they'd taken my bid when I first made it, they would have gotten a lot more money for their clients. But so that happened, and so I'm out August 31st, 2018. I'm out of a job. I'm back here at home, sitting in the same fucking chair I was sitting in before I got the call to ask me if I want to, run a vineyard. And about 3 years later, I wound up being unemployed for 3.5 years. Because, what kind of recommendation are you going to get when, my previous employer was huge, what was a $350 million fraud. And I wound up going to the FBI and being a confidential human source. I even had a code name and everything like that. People aren't going to, they don't want to hear that shit. They want to hear that you did your job and, there was no complications and things like that. So I wound up, they paid me, I was unemployed for 3.5 years, and they paid me the equivalent of 2 months' salary. The FBI did. 2 months of my salary, but no, when I was working for the vineyard. So not much.
Yeah.
All right. Now, not something that not a lot of people know. Do you know how they paid me?
I hope to God it's like money orders.
Cash.
They just paid you cash? That's weird.
Cash. I had to go to the FBI office in Boston. Sign in a secure area, and they come out and they lay down packets of $10,000. I have to sign, and then I have to sign a release and all this, but I can't sign it under my real name. I have to sign it as my code name. I mean, there's some parts of this. There's just like, I was going through it, so I'm like, yeah, whatever. Just give me the cash,
Right.
I want this thing over, but yeah. So they, I had to sign up my code name.
So they only paid you 2 months for. Oh, that seems like a pretty healthy lowball, yeah?
Yeah. And that's one of the other lessons that I learned in this whole thing. You read about all these, whistleblowers and everything like that getting, 85 million, 15 million, whatever. This was a $350 million fraud.
Right.
And I got 40 grand. But I got it in cash. So,
I mean, that's wonderful because everyone loves carrying cash. It's the best.
Yeah, but then you have to go to the bank the next morning and you have to sit there and deposit it, and they're going to write a suspicious activity report,
Right.
which goes to the FBI.
Right, exactly.
I even said
Oh,
to the
God.
FBI, I said, they're going to write an SAR when I deposit this money. He goes, hey, his exact words were, I'll take care of that. So, yeah, it was a bizarre, starting in 2013, ending in 2018. Well, and Burns committed suicide in 2021. It was just a bizarre 8 years. And I sat down and I told my mother the story.
Oh, God.
Because at this point, I haven't told many people the story. Now, my mother was, very smart. She was a teacher and everything like that. And she just looks at me and she goes, write it down. This is a great story. Write it down. So I did. And I actually got it published. And, there it is. Pirate Cove. Came out November 7th.
Oh, geez. So that still has new book smell on it.
It does. It does. So, now, you Google me and now it just says Richard D. Bailey, author, which cracks me up.
Oh, because I was going to say, like, what are you doing nowadays?
I'm actually doing work. I'm doing some work for a company down in Southwest Georgia. So I go down there about, 40% of my time and just kind of helping them get everything going. It's a waste to energy. Actually, it's a pretty interesting company. Their technology is really interesting, but it's basically a startup,
Mm-hmm.
So, and I get to travel. So,
I mean, that's never a bad thing.
No, I love traveling.
So with everything that happened, right?
Yep.
And knowing the, I guess, fallout that came from it, would you do the same thing?
I have had that question.
I know it's super cliche, but I'm actually interested, and I'm not just saying it for fodder.
I probably would, because the reason I did it in the first place. Well, the reason I did it in the first place is I just, I'm one of those people that I'm eternally curious, and I got to sit there, and if there's something that's kind of mysterious to me, I got to figure it out. So, and I didn't want to be, once I realized that there was a felony involved, I didn't want to be on the wrong side of it.
Right.
These guys got arrested and went to prison, one killed himself. But would I do it again? I probably wouldn't go through the whole undercover BS again, because, even though, the FBI kind of, every time they wire you up, they tell you how grateful the government's going to be. And, it does, I don't know. I actually struggle with that question. Would I do it again? Because I don't feel as if it's not, it's not a question of the reward or lack of reward, and I got a book out of it, big whoop. But, I just don't know if I'd put myself through it again, because, what it does to you, you go through massive anxiety.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you're like feeling, I got this. I'm on top of the world right now. I can take care of it. Then all of a sudden you got the anxiety again, and then you're waking up in the middle of the night. And then, actually the actual wearing a wire and doing that was, that was actually kind of fun. It was, an adventure.
It's the what if before it happens, because too much, you've seen too much. I mean, I got to imagine that on a daily basis leading up to that, you're like, fuck, man, I might die. Like, they have private jets. I'm pretty sure they're probably packing heat too. So
that's okay. So when I got asked to wear a wire, that was what I went through in my head driving home after I got that question. And, I kind of made the calculation that these aren't, these are accountants, that these aren't the kind of guys who, you open your door and they're going to sit there with a shotgun and blast you, and that's actually what I figured that was the worst case scenario. Now, when they get out of prison, I don't know, I doubt it. I'm the least of their problems. But I mean, would I do it again? I probably wouldn't go through the whole undercover stuff. I'd just be a good citizen and testify. Yep, that doesn't look right. Yeah, that doesn't look right. But as far as the undercover stuff, the older I get, the more I'm leaning to, I'm not sure that was worth it.
You think they would have got the convictions if you didn't?
Well, what the FBI did tell me was that my work got them the search warrant to go and raid their offices. And the FBI and the IRS raided their offices in, that would have been 2016, January of 2016. But yeah, I mean, would I do it again? Not like that.
How long did they get?
Well, I mean, they had the good fortune of going through the process, the criminal justice process, during COVID. So, like the first one guy was sentenced to 18 months. The first guy was sentenced to 18 months. He did about 4 and then got, compassionate release during COVID. The other guy got 18 months. He did about 9. But, these guys are out. I mean, they're on probation for 5 years. They're on supervised release. So they're still hooked up to the criminal justice system. The master, not the second in command of the private equity firm, he got 5 years, but he's getting out in a couple months, and he's probably that'll probably be 2.5 years they'll have done.
That doesn't make any sense. How do you embezzle and launder that much money and get shorter than a college term? Like,
yeah, go figure, huh? And it's up to the judge. I mean, the sentencing guidelines, which are advisory, I found a calculator online of the U.S. sentencing guidelines, and they all should have gotten 10 plus.
I mean, I was thinking like double digits at minimum.
Yeah. Well, that's probably yeah.
I mean, I know you kind of mentioned it, but is there any fear on your life?
Occasionally, it runs through my head, but it is what it is. I take, if I was going to try to hide all about this, everything like that, I never would have written a book. And that was probably part of the calculus I had to do in my head before I wrote the book.
Right.
But I don't worry about that. I'm not going to spend my life worrying about it.
No, you can't.
Shoulder. Every once in a while, you get a tweak of, he looks familiar. Stop. Just knock it off. I mean, but that's that happens.
Wow.
It's a trip, and it's something that I always read that the crux of a good story was an ordinary schmo like me being thrust into extraordinary circumstances. And, I think those qualify as extraordinary circumstances. Now, whether it becomes a Hollywood movie or a TV show, who knows? I've had a lot of people talk to me about that, but, nobody's written any checks.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely movie-like. I mean, I said it to you earlier. It's like, I feel like you're talking about an episode of The Sopranos here. You just kind of elongate to 2 hours. There you go. You got a movie.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things that I'd figured out and discovered that would add more depth to a movie or to the story, but I didn't put it in the book. I originally and I actually wrote in Writer's Digest. They contacted me when the book came out, and I wrote that listen, what I did when I didn't decide to write the book. What I did is I put it on Substack, one chapter at a time. So I write the first chapter, and then I put it on Substack. Next thing you know, I start getting members and things like that, and followers and people on my email list. So then I get a couple more. Some of the people who came on my email list were relatives of the folks who went to jail, went to prison. There were a lot of people who were victims. insurance really isn't a victimless crime, because when all those insurance companies that they owned went under, and then the taxpayers in those various states have to pick up the tab. So, so I wrote it on Substack. I did chapter after chapter. And when I got to the end, I packaged it up, sent it to a bunch of, publishers. And one of them said, yeah, I'll pay you a little bit of money. Emphasis on little. But it's a hardcover book, and it's in Kindle. It's in audiobook. You can get it on Amazon right now. Shameless plug, I know.
Well, I was going to say, make sure that we circle back to that, because I always tell people, here, plug your stuff up, because I always put it in the show notes anyway. But wow,
yeah, it's an extraordinary. It was very real. And there's certain times. I'll tell you a quick odd story. So I had dinner in northern New Jersey with one of the guys who was the target at that point of the big target. The 26-year-old kid, turns out he was cooperating with the feds, for a long time, and he was trying to get his way out of it so he didn't have to go to prison. But I'm sitting there, I'm driving home from dinner with one of the principals, and one of the guy who got the longest jail sentence. And now I've got 3 wires on me. I've got one in my this pocket, one in my shirt pocket, and I've got this thing in my suit coat pocket, which looks like what you would expect in like an Iraqi IED, improvised explosive device, to look like, because it's just like scary. It's got these wires hanging off it. The wires are literally standing right here out of my suit coat pocket. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, and it's northern New Jersey. I'm not from New Jersey. I don't spend a lot of time in New Jersey. And I'm going back to the hotel about 30 minutes away from where the dinner was, where I'm to meet the FBI and hand them back all their toys. And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden there's a cop following me. I mean, right on my bumper, and I'm sitting there going, how do I explain all this shit that are in my pockets?
Yeah.
And so I sat there, and I said, I called the lead agent's name, and I said, I don't know if you can hear me, but there's a cop following me, and how do you want me to explain all the toys I got on me? 30 seconds later, maybe 2 minutes later, the cop pulls over to the side of the road and lets me go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I would like to think that, there was something involved. The FBI was involved in that, but
absolutely. There's absolutely no way there wasn't.
Yeah. So, yeah, there was a lot of bizarre stuff. I was actually coming down after one of my meetings with all these guys, with all of them, except the 26-year-old kid. As I said, he disappeared. Never saw or heard from him again. But I'm coming down the elevator. They're building in Manhattan. By this time, they moved to southern Manhattan. First time I've got a wire on. They always give you 2 wires, because in case one goes out. All right. So a little redundancy. So they're sitting there, and one of the guys, who was a nice guy, I can't believe he got involved in this, sits there and goes, hey, Richard, you're probably going to get your picture taken just for being seen with us. And I'm sitting there, and I've got my phone in my hand, and I'm texting the FBI, who's outside waiting for me to come out. And I'm saying, coming out, not alone. And as I hit send, he goes, you're going to get your picture taken just for being seen with us. And I sat there and go, I'll do the jokes, And so everybody cracks up, doors open, we walk out the lobby, and 50 yards away, 2 guys with big cameras pointing at us. They were taking our pictures.
Yeah.
So.
Did they ever figure out where he got all this money to do all of this business, or did that never really come out in the wash?
No, they figured it out. They created bogus securities. They printed up securities on their office computers, and they created a company which said that they would do evaluation of the securities, and then they deposited them in one of the largest banks in the country. And they just basically bought these insurance companies, using bogus certificates, bogus stock certificates, had somebody represent that, another company of theirs represent that this was real money. These were real stock certificates of a, what's called a unit investment trust. And then so that got them control. Now, even though that got them control of the insurance companies. So now, insurance companies have huge cash flows. They have to. All right. So then they sat there and they created more securities and sold those securities to the insurance companies that they owned, took that money, all right, that they sold the securities to, in grand total $350 million. And then they went, had fun with it.
That seems too easy.
I'm really surprised. I mean, these were not dumb guys. They were, they were experienced finance guys. Why didn't somebody sit there and say, what is this? You can't do this. They're going to see through this. But they all thought nobody's going to know. And that's one of the things that always drove me crazy about doing this is the constant saying, like, nobody will find out. Nobody's going to know. And that's how these frauds, and once they're in for a little, they get, the first time was, $25 million out, which they bought the vineyard with. Once they get that out, then all of a sudden, okay, what's next? That now all of a sudden they got the needle in their arm. They're hooked. They're addicted. And it just gets bigger and bigger until the whole thing falls apart. And eventually it did all fall apart.
Do you think if they stayed small, they would have gotten away with it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If they had somehow, if they could have, if they had stayed small, they could have figured out a way or raised some money to buy back those securities that they put on the balance sheets and took the cash out from. They could have done a legitimate transaction. Hopefully nobody would find out that the securities that they were buying out were bogus, but that generally does come out in the due diligence process. But yeah, they could have, if they had stayed small, they would have had a lot longer life.
Definitely one of them would have. Oof.
Yeah. Yeah. He was 32 when he killed himself.
Not to be dark, but how do you do it?
Ketamine and some pill, some liquid powder, which was found in a glass that he drank. And basically what it does is it separates the oxygen from your blood cells. So he took ketamine to kind of, which is kind of almost like an anesthesia. And then he suffocated himself to death internally.
Good God.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the kid was so messed up. He moved to Charleston, South Carolina. Nice place, and he meets this nice girl. And now Alex was a very socially awkward individual. He just was just a weird kid. And he meets this girl, and he says, "Why don't you go to graduate school? I'll pay for it." Because he's all of a sudden still taught. He's acting. He went down to South Carolina as if nothing happened in New York, and just cooked up the same dream. He actually told people he was a retired hedge fund manager. And so what he did is he borrowed money. He forged documents with Discover Bank in her name, borrowed the money for the tuition, took the money, paid the tuition, and pocketed the balance. She knew nothing about it. Signed her name because a digital signature, Yeah, he was just,
yeah, the world's probably better that he's gone.
Yeah. I've had conversations with people who went to school with him, like grammar school and middle school and high school, just said he was an odd dude, always trying to make himself seem bigger and, more in wealthier. He came from a part of Connecticut, which is very, very wealthy. But he always wanted, and I always said this about Alex. He didn't want to impress you. He wanted to make you in awe of him. Literally, the first thing he says to me at a meeting is, now, my son at the time, when I first started, was a freshman at Yale. And Alex walks in. Yeah, well, smart kid. Gets it from his mother. He walks in. Alex Burns walks in and goes, "So I hear your son's a classics major at Yale." I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I was a classics major until the head of I was running a hedge fund in my dorm room, and the head of the endowment had me thrown out because my returns were better than his."
So he was very much always in a dick measuring contest. always kind of.
I'm going to keep that. Yeah, that describes him perfectly.
Oh, that's so annoying. It's literally that person that anything you say, "Oh yeah, well I was in a car accident too, but my leg was broken in 4 places. You just broke your ankle." It's like, oh, fuck off, guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really like speak ill on the dead, but dude, good riddance. Like people like that are just the worst to deal with.
His mother didn't even have a funeral for him. You know, she's a professor at the New York University Business School.
Have they ever reached out to you?
After Alex took his powder and left, and he had a lot of things at the big vineyard house, the 8,000 square foot vineyard house, which I wound up having to take over. And I was responsible for getting all his personal effects out. And, you know, he had a Porsche with the license plate reinsure, should have just been scam. You know, he had all sorts of things. Inflatable doll, I will say that.
That was weird. Okay.
Well, you know, this kid couldn't get laid in our house with a fistful of hundreds.
Oh man, I haven't heard that saying in a long time. Oh boy, good one.
You know, but yeah, so I got to know his mother. She was a hard charger type of person, and you know, I contacted her after he killed himself. I said, "Are you gonna hold a funeral?" I said, "You know, if you are, you know, I'd like to go," because Alex I didn't dislike him. He was a nice kid. He was just a messed up kid. Yeah, and she said, "Nope, no funeral. He was cremated, and I'll tell you where his ashes are if you want to go visit." That was it.
So I'm assuming that part of the family was just absolutely ashamed.
You know, how would you respond?
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
She's trying to be, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, I get it, but it's also, it's
still your kid.
Right. Like that's kind of, he did a lot of bad money stuff and he was socially terrible, but it's a little different than like, what did he go to jail for? Oh, well, he was molesting and eating kids. It's like, you know what? We're not going to fucking do a funeral. Fuck that guy. Yeah. This is more like you're a shit person, but you're still I can still like call you my kid with some, I don't know. That's,
you know, it's like Buddy Fight in the movie Wall Street, you know, going back with, you know, Gordon Gekko and everything like that. You know, the Charlie Sheen character, Bud Fox, is sitting there saying to his dad, who works at an airline, you know, it's a mechanic at an airline. He goes, "I'm going to go to jail, Dad." He goes, "I've never been more proud of you than this day," because you're taking your punishment, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's, I don't know. That's a little harsh.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, but he was, you know, I don't know. It was sad. He wasn't a bad kid. He just had no guidance, no inner compass that says this is good, this is bad. You know, every idea, if it was his, was the smartest. And I've heard him say, I heard him say that a dozen times, you know. Oh, this is one of his favorite lines. "I am always the smartest person in the room." Wow.
Once again, it's one of those situations. If you are going around town saying you got the biggest dick in the town, you
Yeah.
probably are packing not much of anything there. So
Right.
if you need to tell people something, it's probably you're more so telling yourself. You're just
Yeah.
getting someone
Yeah.
to validate you. So that's oh god, what a douche. Mm.
He was. I mean, and a lot of people, a lot of people got hurt. The various states. This was a crime that impacted 39 states.
Oh, yikes. Wow.
But for a little
And
while,
just kind of imagine what he could have done if he actually directed his ways. I mean, it's cliche, but if he could have used that power for good,
yeah, but for a little while there, he was, flying private. He was, hanging out at the best restaurants in New York. He was buying tables at big fundraisers in New York. He rented a huge apartment in the Essex House on Central Park South, with balconies overlooking the Central Park. I mean, for a little while there, he was everything that he really was trying to be. The problem was he got there the wrong way.
I wonder if they already had their eyes on him before you came forward, because you put yourself out there like that, and it's like, who are you? I'm basically a banker. It's like, okay, but
that's a
are
really
you?
interesting question, because in my first meeting with the FBI, they wanted to know a little bit about Alex, but it was almost like they already knew about him.
They wanted to make sure, like, hey, are we right about our assumptions here?
Right, and they wanted to know about everybody else.
Okay.
Because
I mean, I'm by no means any, criminal, law person or anything like that, but I do have a noggin on my noggin, and I would personally think seeing somebody that is not in the celebrity sphere, somebody that's not an athlete, especially in New York, you're doing this you are seen. It is not like you're in Madison, Wisconsin, right?
Right.
So you are being seen, even though there's millions of people there, all that shit, whatever. You are being seen. You are doing this. There are eyes on you. And it's like, that's that fucking guy again.
Very, very high visibility, life. And he wanted that, I mean, but one of the things that always kind of, he never thought, I don't think he ever considered that he would get caught in his lies. I mean, I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is. I mean, I have a ton of friends that went to Yale. My first job out of college, I worked for the, mayor of New Haven as an assistant to the mayor, as a staff job, and we dealt with the folks at Yale all the time. My son was at Yale when he's sitting there telling me that he went to Yale. And I'm like, why would you? And I asked him a question, a very Yale-centric question. I said, so, where did you live your freshman year? He couldn't remember, and I was like, remember thinking that, going, everybody remembers where they lived their first day of college. It's just one of those big memories, at least for me, but he couldn't tell you. He couldn't tell me. And I was like, okay, there's some, we were sitting at Smith and Walensky's, me and him and another guy, and he's all on about Yale and things like that. And so he literally has me get my son on the phone, So I call him, and I call my son. He's like, yeah, Dad, hi. I said, yeah, hold on. I got somebody here that, wants to ask you a couple questions. His name is Alex Burns. I said, he went to Yale and everything like that. So he talks with Alex for a few minutes, with Burns for a few minutes. And that was it, at the end. So I'm walking back to the hotel. First of all, my son told me originally that he was hanging out with a bunch of his friends. My wife told me that when I called, he was actually, making out with his first girlfriend at Yale.
Nice.
So a nice little interruption there. He's going to kill me for saying this. But anyway, so I'm walking back to my hotel from that dinner, and my son texts me, yeah, this story doesn't make sense. He'd figured that out already. He goes, if you, he goes, I don't think this guy went to Yale. So why do you both try to bullshit me on the subject?
Because I'm telling you, it's a dick measuring contest. He wants to it's one of those things where I feel like he seemed, from what you're telling me, he seems like he always needs to be right, and
Yes.
he will convince. He thinks he can convince everyone in the room that he's right.
Yeah.
Because people are way below him.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, he was, but he kind of liked me in a way that, because I think, there was times when I'd sit there and talk to him like he was one of my kids. He wasn't much older than my oldest son,
Right.
And I'd sit there and go, you sure you want to do that, kid? Stop calling me kid,
Well, stop fucking acting like it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I probably because you told him no, and he's like, I'm not sure of that word. What does that mean?
Yeah, that could be. That
may have been like the catalyst. That may have
really
been the
good point.
catalyst to kind of say, like, oh, this guy got the cojones to kind of say no to big bad me. And in his head, he probably looked at it as this strong-willed act of defiance. On your side, you're like, don't you work in money? What are you, fucking dumb? What are you doing?
It was a stupid deal. It was just a stupid deal.
Oh man, to be a day to live in that guy's head, to see how he sees the world.
Yeah. He was an interesting guy,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe he could have made something of himself, maybe not.
I feel like his personality flaws were get in the way.
He would have gone
quick.
The sentencing guidelines for him were probably 15 to 20 and plus, because the amount of the theft, $350 million, that just puts you right up there with, like,
I was gonna say, would he have actually gotten that, or would it have been like, hey, here's 7 days in prison? Like,
I don't know. He probably would have got 7 to 10. And he would have come out under 40 if he did that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And to think, like, he lived it up. He lived his life better than 1,000 people combined would have in those few years that he was running his thing.
Oh,
what's 7 years in a clink?
Yeah, he was living higher than I ever lived.
Ah, jeez. You got a hell of a story, man. That's interesting.
Thank you.
Like I said, I briefed over it. Didn't want to get too many details until we actually talked, but yeah, it really is like a motion picture situation there.
Well, your lips to God's ears, and
yeah,
and Spielberg called me on the phone. I guess that's what
there you go. Well, where can everybody find you? What do you have that we can find?
The website is very simple. It's rdbailey.com. And there's lots of information about the book and about me. And I've had that email at RD Bailey for about 20 years, but I never put the website up until we published the book. So that's where you can find the book. That's where you can find information about me in the book and the story. And I will put this podcast up there on there as well. And,
nice.
But you can get the book online at Amazon. Pirate Cove is the name of the book. Here, I'll show you another picture here. You can't get the light there. Oops.
Yeah, I got
Pirate
you.
Cove, and you get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can get it in Kindle form, audiobook. The guy who I didn't read the audiobook, I didn't do that part. They hired somebody for it.
Yeah.
So I would have been too acerbic. I would have sitting there going, I would have been adding things.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost part of the appeal, but I think that's why a lot of people don't do that on their own. They're like, oh, I forgot this one thing. It's like, you're reading a book. Stop it. You can't ad-lib here. This is not improv.
I know. I've been sitting there going, was that an asshole thing to say or what?
Right. But honestly, it's almost like a director's cut of a DVD. You have the little narration thing. So actually, there might be a market for that. But
no, that's where you can find the book.
Okay, good deal. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you taking the time out. I'm glad we got our audio issues figured out.
Thank you very much. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get this out here to you by the morning. I'll send you the audio and the audio video links in your email, and do with them what you will. There we go.
I shall. And Rich, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure.
Hey, no worries, buddy. Appreciate you. You take it easy, okay?
You too. Thanks.
All right. Bye.